When Mike decided to rescue an abandoned puppy, he never imagined that within a few months, he would discover it wasn't a dog at all. Keeping the animal would mean completely changing his life. It all started on a regular afternoon as Mike loaded his shopping bags into his car. Out of the corner of his eye, something on a nearby truck caught his attention. A small cage inside of which sat a tiny, forlorn puppy. The little creature looked heartbreakingly sad, yet undeniably beautiful. Its thick, fluffy coat and soulful eyes tugged at Mike's heartstrings. He felt an immediate connection. Curious, he waited for the truck's owner to return and struck up a conversation. "Where did you get that puppy?" Mike asked. The farmer sighed. "He was abandoned near my farm. We get a lot of unwanted animals dumped there." Mike's stomach twisted as he listened. The farmer explained that he and his workers had repeatedly tried to chase the pup away, but it kept coming back, hungry, desperate, alone. At first, they tolerated it, but then something happened that changed everything. Driven by hunger, the pup had wandered into the chicken coop, attacking the birds in a frantic attempt to survive. Several chickens were lost, not just to the pup's desperate hunger, but to the sheer panic caused by the intrusion. For the farmer, the loss was devastating. With limited resources, he couldn't afford such setbacks. He admitted that he couldn't bring himself to harm the animal, but he had already made a decision. He was taking the pup to the vet to be euthanized. Mike's heart pounded. He couldn't let that happen. He was just trying to survive, Mike. Doesn't? He's just a baby. Without hesitation, Mike made an offer. He would take the puppy. He even offered to pay for the farmer's losses, ensuring he could replace the livestock. The farmer agreed, on one condition. "I never want to see that dog on my land again." Mike nodded. He reached into the cage and lifted the trembling pup into his arms. The little body relaxed against his chest, as if sensing that at last he was safe. From that moment on, the puppy was his. Mike named him Lucky. At first, keeping him was a challenge. Mike lived in an apartment with no backyard and limited space. But he made it work, rearranging his home to give Lucky enough room to play. The bond they formed was instant and deep. Whether it was because Lucky somehow understood that Mike had saved him, or because they simply had a connection beyond words, Mike had never known a dog could be such a true companion. They spent hours together, playing and exploring. Lucky had boundless energy, always ready for an adventure. But there was one thing Mike hadn't expected. Lucky never stopped growing. At first, it was gradual. A little bigger each week, a little fluffier. But soon it became impossible to ignore. By just a few months old, he was already massive. Strangers were taken aback. What kind of dog was he? Mike had assumed he was some sort of wolf-dog mix. But now, as Lucky towered over other dogs at the park, even that explanation seemed unlikely. Was there something wrong? Some kind of hormonal imbalance? As much as he feared the answer, Mike knew he had to find out. When they arrived at the vet's office, Mike barely had time to check in before the nurse caught sight of Lucky. She let out a small gasp. Then, she screamed. Immediately, they were asked to move into another room. The staff seemed genuinely afraid. Mike tried to reassure them. "He's just a puppy," he insisted. "He wouldn't hurt anyone." But at this size, no one believed him. Lucky was only a few months old, and already bigger than the largest dog breeds. What was he? Mike braced himself for answers that would change everything. Mike had his suspicions. Lucky was bigger than any dog he had ever seen, and his thick black coat only made him look more imposing. He had convinced himself that Lucky was the offspring of two purebred wolf dogs, but deep down, he wasn't so sure. Months later, he would find out the truth. The moment they walked into the vet's office, Lucky towering behind him, the doctor let out a chuckle. "Now that is one big pup," the vet said, shaking his head as Lucky rested his massive head on Mike's shoulder. Mike smiled. "Yeah, he just loves to be close to me." But everything changed in the next few moments. The good news? Lucky was completely healthy. Nothing was wrong with him. The other news? Lucky wasn't a dog at all. The vet sighed. Sorry to break it to you, but you've been raising a full-blooded Canadian black wolf. A wild truth. For a moment, Mike was speechless. A wolf. A full wolf. The vet explained that there were no traces of dog ancestry in Lucky's genetic makeup. This was a pure wild animal. The revelation stunned Mike. How had he not known? Looking back, the signs were there. Lucky's diet preferences, his sheer size, the way people reacted to him. But never once had Lucky shown aggression. Never once had he made Mike feel unsafe. And now, knowing the truth, he had a difficult choice to make. The vet informed Mike that by law, he had to report the discovery to the local wildlife authority. From there, officials would decide what to do. Whether Lucky could stay with Mike or if he needed to be relocated. It was a crushing thought. Lucky was domesticated now. He had never hunted for himself, never lived in a pack. If they sent him to a rescue or sanctuary, would he survive? And what about their bond? Mike refused to let go without a fight, a life-changing decision. A few days later, a wildlife inspector arrived to assess the situation. He watched as Lucky, despite his massive size, gently nudged Mike's hand for affection. He saw the way the wolf leaned into him, completely trusting. You two have something special, the inspector admitted. I don't want to break that up if there's a way to make it work. But there were conditions. Mike could not keep a wolf in the city, if he wanted. To keep Lucky, he would have to move out of town, somewhere the wolf could live more naturally. He would also need to register as an animal rescue expert and create a suitable enclosure to keep both Lucky and the public safe. It was an extreme ask. Most people would have given up. But Mike loved Lucky. He sold his home, emptied his savings, and bought a small plot of land outside city limits. It wasn't easy, but Mike knew it was the only way to keep his best friend. Going viral. Mike started documenting his journey on social media. At first, he simply shared videos of Lucky as a tiny pup and the massive wolf he had become. But as more people discovered his story, the reaction was overwhelming. Some people were fascinated, amazed by the unbreakable bond between man and beast. Others were outraged. How could you not know he was a wolf? Some asked. You shouldn't be keeping a wild animal, others argued. The debate raged on, but through it all, one thing remained constant: Mike's dedication to Lucky. The wolf was not just a pet, he was family, and nothing would change that. Mike's following grew massively in just a few weeks, but he didn't care about the attention. His focus was solely on getting the place ready for inspection. He had spent all his money on making the enclosure suitable for Lucky, ensuring he had a safe and comfortable place to sleep. He budgeted carefully, prioritizing the most important things. Unfortunately, the inspector didn't think the enclosure was good enough. According to him, Lucky needed much more space to be comfortable. Mike had planned to let Lucky roam freely and take him on long walks, just as he always had. But that didn't matter to the inspector. He made it clear that all the required parameters had to be met. There was no room for negotiation. It was an all-or-nothing situation. The inspector warned Mike that he had only a few weeks to make the necessary changes, or Lucky would be taken away. Though he could see the bond between them, his hands were tied. He had to ensure that all of the animal's needs were met before he could license Mike's property as a shelter. In reality, he should have taken Lucky right then and there, but he was rooting for them and hoped they could get it done. His warning was a lifeline, but to Mike it felt like the end of the world. Mike had no chance of getting everything done in time. He had already spent all his savings on buying the property and getting it to its current stage. He was still working his day job in the city, but that income would never be enough to cover the necessary upgrades. He had to come to terms with the heartbreaking reality that he would have to say goodbye to Lucky. Wanting to make the transition easier for the wolf, Mike began spending less time with him. But this only broke both of their hearts. Lucky became depressed, confused as to why his best friend no longer played with him. Mike, on the other hand, felt helpless. Lucky was too attached to him, Would he even survive if he was taken away from the only family he had ever known? The thought made Mike sick with worry. Then something extraordinary happened. A friend commented on one of Mike's posts, sharing the struggles he was going through. The story touched people's hearts, inspiring them to come together and support him. Suddenly, everyone wanted to help. Before Mike could even process what was happening, donations began pouring in. He soon had enough money to build the enclosure exactly as required. When the inspector returned to check on the progress, he was overjoyed to see that everything was up to code. He had never been happier to give someone good news. Mike was officially licensed to keep Lucky. The young man rejoiced, and his online supporters celebrated alongside him. With the stress of losing Lucky behind him, Mike focused on rebuilding their bond. It was a relief to know that he now had all the right paperwork to care for his best friend properly. He could finally shift his attention to training and providing for Lucky in the best way possible. But Mike wasn't going to stop there. His journey with Lucky had inspired him to do more. There were still many animals out there who needed help. And now that he had the proper license, he could provide them with a safe home. He just needed the resources to make it happen. Seeing how invested people were in Lucky solidified something important for Mike. Many people want to help animals, even if they don't have the skills or time to do so. They were still willing to support those who could. This realization led Mike to create Lucky-themed merchandise, using the sales to fund the sanctuary. People also started reaching out to him whenever they heard about wolves or wolf hybrids in need. Mike couldn't say no. Soon, Lucky had friends. Other rescued wolves, hybrids, and even unexpected animals like a few wild boars who adored belly rubs. But it didn't stop with wolves. Mike's sanctuary became a haven for any animal that needed help. His natural talent for bonding with animals was undeniable. The day he found that little puppy in a crate on the back of a truck was the day he discovered his true calling. Since then, he had changed so many lives, and he had no intention of stopping. His biggest dream now was to create large, natural enclosures for all the animals in his care, starting with Lucky. He wanted to give the wolf a life as close to the wild as possible, while still ensuring his safety. As a massive animal who loved head scratches, Lucky would never be able to survive on his own, but Mike was determined to give him the next best thing. Until that dream became a reality, Mike continued pouring his heart and soul into providing love, care, and safety for every animal that came his way. Life had changed dramatically since the days when everyone believed Lucky was just a dog. Yet despite all the challenges, one thing remained the same: the unbreakable bond between man and wolf, and that would never change. Would you have helped Lucky too? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Would you love to live in an animal sanctuary? Thanks for listening and see you in the next video. Have a great day.